Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International.
Authorities in the Colombian department of Sucre say that a wanted robber and arms trafficker is in custody this week after he recently gave his location away to police by live streaming about his criminal exploits on social media. The incident began recently when several residents in the La Selva neighborhood of the city of Sincelejo brought a video to the attention of police. It was a Facebook live stream made by a man named Cristian Mercado Serpa, better known by his criminal alias, El Patera. According to local news sources, El Patera has an extensive criminal history and was wanted for his activities in connection with an organization dedicated to theft and arms trafficking. However, police had been unable to find him. That apparently all changed when police were alerted to El Patera's livestream, in which he could be seen drinking, showing off weapons, and singing. He also bragged about a high-end robbery he had supposedly just pulled off. Thanks to the video, police were able to uncover the location where El Patera was hiding out, and were soon on their way to make an arrest. Upon arrival, gunshots were exchanged, leading to El Patera being hit in the arm and the chest. The wanted man was taken to the University Hospital in Sincelejo, where he is said to be recovering in police custody. He is now facing numerous charges for crimes including theft, homicide, and illegal possession of firearms. At the current time, authorities say they're still searching for an associate of El Patera's who was allegedly with him at the time of his arrest, but who managed to escape.
Representatives from England's Nottingham Crown Court say that a 48-year-old man has been sentenced to 3 years in prison this week after he held up a shop with what was first thought to be a gun, but was later revealed to be a roll of toilet paper. According to reports, the incident took place sometime on April 14th, when 48-year-old Paul MacDonald stormed into a shop on Wallerton Street in Nottingham city centre. After approaching the shop's register, MacDonald threatened the teenage cashier, demanding that he hand over some money. At the time, MacDonald was gripping something under his jacket and pointing it at the cashier. Believing that this was a gun, the teenager handed over a small amount of cash from the register, after which MacDonald ran off. However, after apparently deciding he didn't want the thief to get away, the teenage cashier put aside the danger he felt that he was in and chased after MacDonald. He quickly managed to catch up to him and tackled the 48-year-old to the ground. It was then that the teenager realized that MacDonald wasn't armed at all. His supposed weapon was actually an empty toilet paper roll. While MacDonald tried to flee the scene, everything went downhill for him from here. After dropping the stolen cash, he was found by police anyway a few minutes later and placed under arrest. After pleading guilty to robbery and having an imitation firearm with intent to commit an indictable offense, MacDonald was sentenced to 3 years in prison this week. Following the sentencing, a detective constable who worked on the case, Rob Marsden, said that he was satisfied with how things turned out, stating, quote, "At the time of the robbery, the shop worker had no way of knowing for sure that the object being pointed at him was anything other than a real firearm. While MacDonald wasn't carrying a weapon during this incident, this was still an incredibly serious offense, so I'm pleased to see that this has been reflected in the length of the sentence handed out to him."
Authorities in the South African province of Limpopo say that they've arrested a 25-year-old man this week after DNA evidence allegedly linked him to the murder of a school teacher earlier this year. According to reports, the case began back on March 6th when 23-year-old Homotso Merapola left her house in the town of Morimole to run a brief errand. She was going out to collect some new clothes from a friend's place who had ordered them for her on the internet. When the 23-year-old never returned, she was quickly reported missing and a search effort was launched. That search came to a tragic end 3 days later when Homotso's body was found in a shallow grave next to a local railway line. While little about the case was released at the time of the 23-year-old's remains were recovered, we now know thanks to new reports released this week that investigators quickly turned their attention to the friend that Homotso was supposed to be meeting with the day that she disappeared. A warrant was obtained to search the person's property, leading to DNA samples that were collected from a shack a few meters from the residence. These samples were analyzed and soon led police to their 25-year-old suspect, a man whose name has not yet been released. He was arrested on July 15th. Unfortunately, it's not exactly clear from reports whether the 25-year-old was the friend that Homotso was supposed to be meeting with that day, or whether they were connected to the case in some other way. The motive behind the crime is also unclear, though police have hinted that the murder could have been a case of gender-based violence. At the time of this recording, the 25-year-old suspect remains in police custody while the investigation reportedly continues.
Authorities in the Indian city of Mumbai say that a local teenager has been arrested this week after his foolhardy get-rich-quick scheme involving mail fraud allegedly backfired. According to reports, the incident began recently when the 17-year-old suspect, who has not been identified by name, came across a supposed ad from one of the country's largest shipping and logistics companies, called Blue Dart. Of special interest to the teenager was a section of the ad that apparently covered the company's guarantees. Namely, that in the case of damage to an insured package, the sender would be entitled to the full value of the contents plus 110% of that amount in damages. This allegedly gave the 17-year-old an idea. After researching how to make homemade explosive devices online, the teenager cobbled together some necessary components, including a cell phone, some firecrackers, batteries, and some other miscellaneous electronic parts. He then assembled them into a package that also included some processors, memory cards, and other computer parts, and crafted a fraudulent invoice for the items, valuing them at 981,000 rupees, or roughly $12,300 US. After purchasing insurance for this package, the 17-year-old scheduled it to be picked up by Blue Dart, indicating that he wanted it to be delivered to an address in Delhi. While it's not entirely clear how the teenager expected the scam to work exactly, from the reports that we came across, it sounds like the basic plan was this. The courier would pick up his package. Somewhere along the way, the DIY bomb would be triggered, destroying the contents inside, and then the 17-year-old would claim the company was responsible and collect money from the insurance on his fraudulent goods. As you might have already guessed, though, this is not what happened. Though the package was picked up as scheduled and taken to Blue Dart's warehouse in the suburb of Jogeshwari, the teenager's DIY bomb did not go off as expected. Instead of simply creating a low-intensity explosion within the box as intended, the device malfunctioned, causing the entire package to catch fire. Unfortunately for the teenage suspect, while the fire was enough to raise suspicions and catch the attention of both the company and police, it wasn't intense enough that it destroyed the shipping information on the package itself. As a result, the entire thing was traced back to the 17-year-old, who was arrested on July 16th following a brief investigation. According to reports, the teenager is now being held on charges of negligent conduct with respect to combustible matter, endangering the life or personal safety of others, and mischief by fire or explosive substance. We're tempted to say that it looks like the scheme really blew up in the suspect's face, though that was sort of the plan all along, wasn't it?
Authorities in southern Spain say that 5 people have been hospitalized this week, some with serious injuries, after an argument between 2 groups of people at a nightclub led to 1 person being stabbed and 4 others being shot. According to reports, the incident took place at around 1 a.m. on July 18th at the Opium Beach Club in the city of Marbella. It allegedly began when an argument broke out between 2 tables of customers who were seated in the club's VIP section. When a man from one of the 2 tables was kicked out by security, it initially seemed like things were over. However, somehow the man was able to make his way back into the club a short time later, this time carrying a concealed knife. Though local police say that their investigation is still in its early stages, based on reports we came across, it seems like upon re-entering the nightclub, the man with the knife went right up to the group of people who he had previously been arguing with and stabbed one of them several times. The stabbing victim, who has since been identified only as a 40-year-old Dutch man, reportedly responded by pulling out a gun and firing several shots in an attempt to hit the suspect with the knife. Not only did the 40-year-old miss the knife attacker, he allegedly hit 4 random people who were apparently not involved in the altercation. These victims have also not been named, though have been identified as a 32-year-old Moroccan woman, a 32-year-old Irish man, and 2 other people ages 18 and 36. Of the 5 people wounded, the Irish man is said to have suffered the worst injuries, Currently, he is said to be in the ICU at a local hospital. The knife attacker managed to flee the scene without getting caught. At the time of this recording, authorities say they're still trying to catch this unknown attacker, but have so far made 2 other arrests in the case. These include the 40-year-old Dutchman who fired his gun in the club and a 26-year-old man believed to be his friend. The situation is still developing.
This week, representatives from Tokyo's Metropolitan Police announced the recent arrest of a 48-year-old man, who they say was responsible for booking thousands of fake reservations as part of a bizarre and incredibly petty months-long scheme to get back at a luxury train service. According to reports, between March and November of last year, the 48-year-old suspect, whose name has not been released, booked a total of 9,313 reservations on a specific luxury train service without ever intending to ride or pay for these reservations. The train service he allegedly targeted is known as Romance Car, operated by the rail company Odakyo Electric Railway, and refers to a series of limited express trains that travel between Tokyo and popular tourist destinations such as Hakone and Gotemba, both of which are mountain towns located near Mount Fuji. Because the service is designed with both luxury and tourism in mind, romance cars are higher end than most trains and offer a meal service as well as compartments with special viewing windows to make it easier to enjoy the sights. As a result, tickets on romance cars reportedly cost about double what you would normally pay for a trip on a standard train. According to Metropolitan Police, the 48-year-old suspect was able to make all of his fraudulent reservations because of a romance car policy that does not require passengers to pay until the time that they are on the train. Because reservations are held all the way until 15 minutes before the train departs, this also meant that usually by the time the company figured out the reservations were illegitimate, it was too late to fill these empty seats with paying passengers. As if this weren't bad enough, sources we came across state that the 48-year-old man went even further in trying to sabotage the company. Apparently, roughly 90% of his thousands of reservations were for observation deck seats on these trains, which are generally both the most desired and the most expensive. He also allegedly targeted peak travel times in order to affect the company and other travelers as much as possible. With all of this being said, you're probably asking yourself, what could this railway have possibly done to upset this 48-year-old man so much? If you can believe it, the whole thing was reportedly over a single train trip where the man wasn't satisfied with Romance Car's service. In particular, he said that during his trip, other passengers were being rowdy and drinking on one of the observation decks, and he got angry because no staff members came to tell them to stop. This is what prompted the man's 9-month-long campaign of revenge. According to reports, the man confessed all of this to police following his recent arrest, also saying that his unhappiness at work played a role. While it's unclear what charges the man will now be facing, it appears that the suspect will be looking at a civil case from the train company as well as a legal one. Many also suspect that the 48-year-old may have single-handedly ruined the convenience of Romance Car's reservation system as well, as there are now unconfirmed reports that the company is considering charging people ahead of time for their train seats.
Authorities in Australia's Northern Territory say that they're investigating a horrific case of alleged domestic abuse after the bodies of 2 adults and a baby were found last weekend. According to reports, the tragic discovery was made around 2:45 p.m. on July 17th at a remote property roughly 25 kilometers north of the community of Alice Springs. Initially, the deaths were labeled merely as suspicious, but subsequent reports painted a far grimmer picture when it was announced that a firearm had been collected from the scene. It's now alleged that a mother and her baby were shot and killed by the woman's violent domestic partner, who then turned the weapon on himself. While police are keeping a tight lid on almost all information related to the case, based on the limited details available at this time, we know that the adults involved in the incident were a 41-year-old man and a 40-year-old woman. All 3 of the deceased are said to be of indigenous descent. Police have also stated that the 2 adults were previously known to them, with others describing the couple as a, quote, tragedy waiting to happen. At the time of this recording, the situation is still developing.
Representatives from the Mexican Navy say that one of the country's most infamous drug traffickers is back behind bars after almost 10 years this week, following a successful operation that resulted in his capture. According to reports, 69-year-old Rafael Caro Quintero first gained notoriety in the late 1970s as one of the founding members of the powerful Guadalajara drug cartel. However, it was his involvement in the 1985 kidnapping and murder of DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena that he would become most infamous for, a killing that he allegedly ordered after blaming Camarena for a raid on a marijuana plantation the year prior. Much of this will likely be familiar to viewers of the Netflix television series Narcos Mexico, which dramatized these events in the first season of the show. Though Caro Quintero was convicted of Camarena's murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison, this sentence was overturned in 2013, when an appeals court ruled that the drug lord should have been tried in a state rather than a federal court. As a result, Caro Quintero was freed after 28 years. While the country's Supreme Court overturned this decision quickly after, by that time it was too late. Caro Quintero was back in hiding and had returned to the drug trade. For nearly the last 10 years, Caro Quintero has remained on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list, with a $20 million reward offered for his capture. This week, that capture finally took place. According to reports, the 69-year-old was caught as part of a large operation conducted by the Mexican Navy. After being tracked to the town of San Simon in Sinaloa by a specially trained bloodhound named Max, Caro Quintero was finally taken into custody. The dog managed to sniff out the drug lord while he was hiding in some bushes. Sadly, the arrest did not come without cost, as it was reported around the same time that 14 Marines had died when their helicopter crashed after taking part in the operation. It said that the crash was an accident and did not result from the capture itself. However, the Marines aboard the helicopter were there specifically to support Caro Quintero's capture. At the time of this recording, the notorious drug lord remains in police custody, with U.S. officials saying that they will be seeking his extradition. That brings us to the end of this edition of Crimes of the Week International. If you're a fan of the new series, don't forget to tell us in the comments section below. While you're there, make sure to subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest videos. Thank you for watching.